Have you ever caught yourself watching someone wealthy and thought, "There's no way that's clean"? Or looked at a luxury car and immediately assumed the owner must have cheated or stepped on people to get it? I'm talking about a specific kind of person who lives inside a painful contradiction. On one side, they long for comfort and security. On the other, they carry a deep suspicion that wealth and morality cannot coexist. They swing between envy for what the rich have and moral condemnation of how they got it. This video is a psychological and spiritual X-ray of that split mind. I will show how their subconscious is wired to reject the very prosperity they say they want. I will show how the universe, which only hands you what you truly believe you deserve, responds to that mixed signal. I'm not here to offer a light analysis. I will expose the whole mechanism of self-sabotage. More important, I will show how to reprogram this pattern with practical steps. If you are tired of living in scarcity while you secretly despise those who escape it, this is the moment to face an uncomfortable mirror. The question is blunt. Can you admit that you might be that kind of person? The next part takes apart what that admission actually looks like in daily life. What you tell the world, what you whisper to yourself, and the quiet, habitual choices that betray your words. What comes next will not be soothing. It will be precise. That opening scene looks small, but it hides a repeating pattern. Seeing a rich person and assuming the worst is not a thought. It is a diagnostic sign. It reveals how someone's internal accounting of morality and money is settled. When I see that reaction, I map 3 layers. What they say in public, what they say in private, what they do when opportunity knocks. Most people in this group love their moral label. They describe themselves as ethical, principled, or above cheap gains. They tell friends they will not sell out for money. They use phrases that sound elevated. They like the mirror that tells them they are morally superior. That mirror is comfortable. It protects them from risk and from admitting fear. But what they repeat to themselves at night is a different script. They tell themselves stories that justify stagnation. The script goes like this: money corrupts. I would rather stay clean than chase it. The world is rigged. If I get rich, I would lose myself. These internal lines soothe shame. They also set a boundary that says, do not cross into visible prosperity. The real test is behavior. This is where the contradiction becomes visible. They will spend hours watching luxury lives online. They will follow influencers with fancy cars and big houses. They will study how others succeed, but in the same breath they mock that success. They whisper, they must be dirty, while refreshingly bookmarking another image of the life they secretly want. This split shows everywhere. A job promotion appears, and they say no because it would change who I am. A chance to raise prices is dismissed with, that would be exploitative. Someone offers a partnership, and they imagine being asked to compromise their values. They refuse. Later they watch the partners succeed and feel vindicated and bitter all at once. Their bitterness is a proof for their story. It confirms their own righteousness. This self-confirmation keeps the loop tight. They call it integrity. The world calls it stagnation. I call it a politics of sufficiency built on fear. They are choosing a moral posture that preserves identity but kills growth. And that choice is not accidental. It is consistent. Let me paint the scene more concretely. Picture a mid-30s creative who freelances and says they value meaning over money. They price their work low. A better offer arrives that requires a slightly bolder sales stance. They flinch. They frame their refusal as protecting clients. Internally, they fear becoming what they condemn. Months pass. The freelancer scrapes by. They feel noble. They also feel resentful. Resentment becomes a daily companion. Or imagine a woman in her 40s who volunteers and meditates. She disdains conspicuously wealthy networks. A friend introduces a mentor who charges for deep coaching that could scale her work. She balks at the fee. She imagines the mentor as opportunistic. The mentor invests, launches, grows. The woman's impact stays small. Every success of the mentor is proof that money buys influence at a moral cost. Her conclusion is neat. She doubles down on stories that keep her safe. You see the structure. The public stance is virtue. The private narrative is fear. The daily action is avoidance. The result is scarcity. The mechanics are consistent, mechanically predictable. From the outside, it looks like ethics. Inside, it feels like exile. And those two realities feed each other. The ethics justify the exile. The exile proves the ethics. This loop is why saying, "I'm ethical" becomes a shield against admitting the real drivers: fear of failure, fear of losing identity, and unresolved envy. Now, this is not only about individual stories. It is social and spiritual. These people talk about the system as if it conspires to reward the immoral. They point at billionaires and construct moral crimes to explain success. Sometimes those accusations stick to real crimes. Often they are creative reinterpretations of difference and luck. That reinterpretation serves a function. It keeps them pure while they secretly desire what they condemn. Here is a truth I say bluntly to anyone who listens. When you morally condemn money, your subconscious files an identity. That file reads, "Money equals bad person." Once saved, your mind will go to work to preserve that identity. It will avoid choices that threaten to break that file. It will find evidence everywhere to keep the belief intact. This is not mystical. It is cognitive economy. The brain prefers coherent stories. It rewards consistency. So how does this play out in relationships? Often in small ways. They judge friends who marry into money. They pry into sources of income when someone does well. They normalize suspicion. They may even sabotage social ties by asking awkward moral questions. They pose as protectors of the vulnerable. It feels noble, but beneath, there is an undercurrent of envy dressed as critique. I say this plainly. Envy is a social emotion that hides under the mask of righteousness. It is sneaky because moral language gives it legitimacy. "I'm protecting others" sounds better than "I wish I had that." But the internal currents are the same. The person both wants and condemns. That cognitive dissonance triggers a slow erosion of options. Let me pull apart the practical consequences, because that is where the universe as I frame it responds. This person will miss incremental leverage. They will not price for value. They will not invest. They will avoid partnerships. They will reject mentorship. They will treat money as an enemy to be kept at bay. The world then offers them precisely what they radiate: scarcity, and often bitterness. You might be thinking I sound harsh. I am, but I am also precise. I have seen this constellation many times. I have listened to people defend their moral posture while secretly counting what they lack. I have heard the tiredness in their voice. The tiredness sounds like a quiet grief for unlived possibility. It is painful. It is also fixable. Before I go further, a small request in the middle of this diagnosis. I am building this conversation and the channel around this work. If this material lands for you, consider subscribing. I want to hit 1,000 subscribers so these ideas can reach a few more people who need a mirror. If you subscribe, drop your city and country in the comments. It helps me build content that actually matches where people live. Thank you. Back to the map. Understanding the contradiction means understanding two consistent habits. First habit, immediate moral filtering. This is the automatic reaction that reduces complex success to a moral story. It is a mental shortcut. It saves cognitive energy, but it also denies nuance. Second habit, opportunity self-protection. This is the behavioral reflex that blocks incremental risk. It appears as principled refusal. It looks like, "I won't compromise. I won't join that crowd. I won't take that contract." Notice the language. It is always framed as staying true. Rarely is it framed as fear. That is the genius of the pattern. It disguises fear as virtue. I will be blunt here. If you find yourself proud of your reluctance to make money, check the motive. Pride about reluctance is a defense. It reads to the universe as an aversion. The universe in the sense I mean matches signals. You may consciously want abundance, but your dominant signal is avoidance. The universe, consistent. I'll take you there next. These profiles are not labels to shame you. They are X-rays. I want you to see the architecture of your pattern. Once you see the architecture, you can intervene. The variations are about how fear dresses itself. They all lead to the same endpoint if nothing changes. They all teach the same lesson. Moral postures can become prisons. One common portrait I encounter looks like this. Outwardly, this person speaks the language of spiritual integrity. They have phrases ready. Money is the root of evil. I choose dignity over wealth. They often quote moral maxims to others. Their network applauds them. This social applause makes the posture sticky. A day in the life of this person is quiet and consistent. They wake, meditate, read a book of ethics, and feel morally fortified. A commercial opportunity appears that would require charging fair value. A whisper enters. That would be selling out. They decline. They sleep well. The next month a bill arrives. The moral posture follows them into inboxes and phone calls. Contempt for the chase becomes a comfort. They feel ethically clean. Privately, they also feel the cold squeeze of not enough. The belief at the core is simple and rigid. Prosperity equates to moral contamination. The more they cling to the belief, the more their choices align with it. The consequence is gradual. Financially, they remain limited. Socially, they may accrue moral status. Emotionally, they live with a quiet resentment when they see others balance money and purpose. That resentment can harden into judgment, which then feeds the original posture. If you see yourself here, the work is to let go of the neat moral equation and replace it with a more flexible worth measure. Another portrait is the one I call the resentful conspirator. This person reads systems as rigged by default. They have a political lens. They are sharp, skeptical, and vocal. They excel at calling out structural injustices. That can be righteous, but their lens often slides into a totalizing narrative. If someone prospers significantly, it must be due to privilege, nepotism, or corruption. A typical day shows them amplifying examples of inequality. They share articles exposing elites. They are the first to point to loopholes and unfair taxes. Then a friend announces a business win. Instantly, analysis shifts from curiosity to accusation. They investigate quietly. They find something to confirm their suspicion. The suspicion justifies the bitterness. Bitterness justifies the suspicion. The loop continues. The belief at root here is a story of systemic unfairness. The cognitive pattern is to explain winners by system alone. The labor, risk, and competence involved in legitimate success are often erased. Consequences are both external and internal. Externally, this person builds a social identity as defender of the underdog. Internally, they live with a pervasive sense that the world will always cheat the deserving. That worldview corrodes initiative. It also makes forming alliances with successful people nearly impossible because those alliances threaten the integrity of the conspiracy story. A third portrait is subtler. I call it the disguised envious. This person slips between admiration and scorn with dizzying speed. They follow luxury feeds, save pictures of dream homes, and yet their public comments are derisive. So much waste, they type. Then they close the browser and fantasize. This oscillation is exhausting. It creates a secret ledger of personal failure. I deserve that, but I am not allowed to have it. Walk through their day and you find micro habits of self-sabotage. They compare constantly. They binge on images of abundance. They try imitating small aspects assured. A book, a workshop, but retreat when cost or risk appears. Their belief is an entitlement thinly held. I deserve it, but something is wrong with me if I pursue it. Consequence, a churn of hope and shame. They swing between planning and paralysis. They may take small, half-hearted actions that never scale. The energy drain here is enormous. Finally, there is a portrait I see as the purist in standby. This person values purpose above all. They wait for the perfect alignment of mission and income. They are idealistic, often brilliant, and painfully slow to act. A project must have absolute integrity before they will commit. They imagine a balance between money and meaning that is pure. The problem is life rarely delivers pure alignment on the first try. Their day is filled with research and refining. They hold out for a model that will both heal and pay. They reject many real opportunities on the grounds of imperfection. They are waiting for a sign that will justify compromise. The core belief is, if I have to compromise my values, the result is not worth it. Consequence, they remain morally spotless. They also remain small. Their impact is limited by perfectionism. The cost is bitter, time, wasted potential, and a slow accumulation of regret. Each of these portraits creates a life script. Different faces. Same trap. The trap is coherent. It is a system of thought that keeps identity intact by sacrificing material options. That sacrifice then sanctifies the identity. The person becomes a walking testimonial for the original belief. I want to be explicit about how these profiles intersect. Many people do not fit a single mold. You can be a disguised envious and a purist at different times. You might develop a conspiratorial stance after years of frustration. The categories are lenses, not prisons. They exist so you can recognize the pattern in motion. Here is a concrete example of transformation I have followed. A man in his late 40s arrived at my door convinced that all wealth came from exploitation. He had spent his adult life denouncing the moneyed class. He was respected in his circles for his moral clarity, but he also had mounting debt and a small, shrinking business. He confessed to me one morning, "I admire them and I hate them. I am tired." We started by mapping his daily mental rituals. We found a pattern of automatic dismissal. Whenever a revenue idea emerged, he shot it down with moral reasoning. We forced a simple exercise on him. For 30 days he had to write down one thing he admired about a prosperous peer every morning. Not blame, not analysis, admiration. At first he resisted. He felt like a traitor. Gradually the muscle loosened. He began to see the concrete habits of those he envied. Discipline, attention to scale, willingness to learn sales. He did not become their clone overnight, but he began to try one small thing, pricing his services according to value. Within a few months his income stabilized. The inner story shifted from money corrupts to money amplifies who I already am. The shift was not magic. It was accumulated, but it was profound. Another story concerns a woman stuck in the purest standby. She waited years for a project that answered every moral test. She had launched half a dozen small pilots and killed each at the first sign of imperfection. We worked on a different metric, integrity of action, not perfection of context. She committed to a 12-week pilot that accepted trade-offs. She learned to measure impact and iterate. Her project found traction. It did not solve every moral worry, but it created choices where none had existed. Over time, her need for absolute certainty dropped. Her courage grew. These two cases show a critical point. The internal scripts are not destiny. They can be edited. The mechanism is practical. It is not confession plus prayer. It is targeted practice. You change the cue. You change the response. You change the habit. You change the results. Before I close this part, let me be clear about what these subtypes share. They all assign moral weight to money. They all protect identity by rejecting forms of prosperity. They all interpret reality to support that rejection. They all train their environment to respond with scarcity. And they all experience moral superiority as a compensation for unmet material needs. That is the tragic economy of the pattern. If you have seen yourself in any of these portraits, there is a direct implication. Recognition is the first step of responsibility. You can keep telling the same story and watch the universe consolidate your scarcity. Or you can own the story, trial a small contrary action, and observe reality respond. In the next part 1, we'll step back and name the law that ties these subtypes together. I will explain the exact mechanism, how beliefs turn into consistent outcomes, and why the universe, in its strange literalness, always answers what you truly broadcast. I will also show how that law is not a cosmic punishment, but the mind prefers coherence. Coherence reduces the anxiety of contradiction. If you believe rich equals bad, and also, I want to be comfortable, you create cognitive friction. To resolve it, the brain leans hard on the identity that gives you moral safety. It will then manufacture behaviors and interpretations that keep the moral story intact. Those behaviors look ethical. They feel noble, but they carry a cost. Watch the path of the signal. A person thinks, often unconsciously, if I succeed materially, I will become someone I despise. That thought produces an emotion discomfort, shame, a small tightness in the gut. Emotion produces avoidance. Avoidance produces small decisions. Underpricing, not pitching, refusing partnership, dithering over pricing, saying no to mentorship that requires payment. Those small decisions accumulate into a life of constraint. The mind counts the constraint as proof. See, it whispers, I was right. If I had been rich, I would have sold out. The proof then cements the original file. The loop is closed. I want you to feel how mechanical this is. It's a simple flow: belief, emotion, avoidance, result, confirmation. The universe, in this framing, is not a moral judge. It is literal. It answers to the strongest, most repeated signal you send. If your strongest signal is, I must remain morally unsullied by wealth, the universe will give you outcomes aligned with that signal. Opportunities appear and dissolve. Offers arrive and get sabotaged. Success happens for others, but never for you. Not because you are cursed, but because you continuously emit a frequency of not deserving. Now imagine a different inner file. Suppose you quietly cultivate the belief. Money is a neutral tool that amplifies who I already am. That small change rewires the signal. The emotion that follows is curiosity instead of shame. Curiosity encourages action. Action produces different results. Different results become evidence that the new file is true. The law does not care about your rhetoric. It cares about the pattern. Repeat one pattern, and the world congeals around it. Repeat another, and the world congeals around that instead. There are several practical features of this law I want to make non-negotiable. First, the subconscious signal is louder than the conscious declaration. You can shout, I want abundance, and still broadcast, I don't deserve it, in thousands of tiny ways. The louder track wins. Second, the law is amoral. It does not punish. It mirrors. It gives you the world that matches your internal program. Third, the law is immediate and accumulative. Every small choice is a data point. Over time, those data points assemble into a consistent pattern that the world recognizes. The gap between intention and actuality narrows into predictability. Let me show how that plays out in daily life, scene by scene. Picture someone who believes money corrupts. They receive an email pitching them to join a paid program with a mentor who can scale their work. Their conscious mind reels at the cost. That's expensive. Their identity file whispers, mentors are selling out. The person pauses, then declines. They sleep easier that night, proud of their integrity. The next week, a different peer launches that program and scales. The person watches the peer flourish and, instead of curiosity, feels a tight vindication. See? They must have cut corners. The emotion is relief wrapped in resentment. That relief is part of the currency that keeps the original belief alive. Or imagine pricing decisions. Value-based pricing requires claiming your worth. For someone with the money is dirty file, claiming worth seems like a moral compromise. They rationalize low fees as service. They convince themselves they're protecting clients. The subconscious then arranges life to match. They stay underpaid, hustling, resentful, noble. The pattern produces a self-image that says, I don't need to be rich, I'm ethical, which then feeds more underpricing. Again, the law responds to the consistent broadcast. There is also a social angle. The law of congruence filters your social attention. You notice and amplify stories that fit your script. When someone prospers, Your radar seeks moral flaws. You become an amateur judge, collecting evidence that supports your identity. That selective attention is the mind's housekeeping. It keeps your inner house tidy. But tidy houses can be small. The universe hands you outcomes that match the tidy interior. If you want new rooms, you must allow a Messier renovation inside. This law also explains why so many people can be experts at moral critique and simultaneously terrible at managing opportunity. Critique is a low-risk activity. It preserves standing while attacking external targets. It is a posture that shields vulnerability. When you critique winners, you avoid the messy internal labor of becoming competent in the same arena. The law rewards coherence. If you consistently choose critique over action, the world responds by offering you the role of righteous critic rather than successful creator. Now, I don't want this to sound like victim blaming. The law of congruence simply maps. It does not moralize the map. People adopt these internal files for reasons: trauma, identity, cultural narratives, righteous rebellion. Those reasons are legitimate feelings. But legitimacy of feeling does not equal effectiveness of strategy. We can honor why someone holds a belief and still be ruthless about its outcome. What about free will? You might ask, if the law is so literal, does it trap you forever? No. Free will operates inside this law by the slow process of deliberate reprogramming. The brain is plastic. The subconscious is trained, not fated. But the training requires two things most people resist: consistent contradictory evidence and repeated corrective action. You cannot flip a file with one inspirational talk. You must build new patterns of attention and behavior that, over time, outshout the old signal. Here is a practical description of that retraining. First, identify the dominant file. Notice the recurring sentence you tell yourself about money. Second, measure its behavioral consequence for 1 week. Track the small yes/es and no/s you gave money. Third, create opposing micro-actions that directly contradict the file. If the file says, "I must never charge high fees," commit to one experiment that charges a price aligned with value. If the file says, "Prosperity corrupts," list 3 prosperous people you respect and write concrete habits they use. Practical evidence beats ideology. Let me be specific about one mechanism the law exploits: confirmation bias. Your subconscious is a professional at finding confirming evidence. If you believe all rich people are exploitative, your attention will find the examples that fit. The law then uses those examples to sustain the file. The escape hatch is intentional counter-evidence. You must hunt for high-quality, consistent counterexamples of prosperity that coexist with integrity. You must keep them in front of your mind until the new pattern starts to feel normal. There is also a temporal dimension. The law of congruence is cumulative. Small actions today are tiny seeds. Seeds look insignificant until they become trees. A single decision to price a service at market value is a seed. It will not make you rich overnight, but it trains your nervous system to inhabit a slightly different identity. Repeat that training and the tree grows. The world then offers resources to a person who looks like someone ready to steward them. Finally, I want to dismantle one particularly sticky belief that feeds this entire system: the idea that integrity requires poverty. That is a romantic construction disguised as virtue. Integrity requires consistency between your ethics and your actions. It does not require impoverishment. In fact, scarcity often produces compromises precisely because resources are constrained. When you are free of basic financial scarcity, you can operate from a larger ethical perspective. Scarcity narrows choice. Abundance expands the arena of what you can do for others. So the law of congruence is not an accusation. It is a diagnosis. It says, your inner file is doing its job. It is running a coherent program. The cost of coherence, when the program is money corrupts, is a life of consistent small betrayals of your own potential. The question is practical. Will you keep running the same program and accept the world that follows? Or will you install a different file, one that allows prosperity and virtue to coexist? The next part will show exactly. She phrases it differently to others. I choose depth over exposure. She declines. Months later, the project leader builds a platform that changes industries. She watches from the sidelines, feeling righteous and hurt. The experience confirms the original belief that I kept my integrity. It also confirms a pattern. Opportunity equals contamination. The loop is perfect. Scene 2. A pricing moment. A consultant is undercharging. A client requests a significant expansion of the work. The consultant thinks, if I raise the fee, I'll be exploiting this client. He lowers his gaze, imagines clients as vulnerable, and offers a discount. He keeps working long hours for low pay. A year later, he is exhausted and invisible. He tells friends the story as proof. I refuse to be like those mercenary consultants. That self-image protects him. It also trains his nervous system to equate pricing with betrayal. The loop spins again. Scene 3. The peer who accelerates fast. A friend launches a course and makes $20,000 in 2 months. The person who holds the money is dirty file rushes to interpret. Was it dishonest marketing? A hidden scam? He digs for evidence. He finds a minor lapse in judgment and magnifies it. The finding comforts him. He can now live in moral clarity. Meanwhile, the friend now has capital to hire staff and scale impact. The loop delivered its moral tonic and the real world moved on. Those vignettes share a hidden economy. Each small refusal also buys a psychological commodity, moral cleanliness. That commodity becomes the currency the person spends to avoid risk. They trade market advantage for psychic comfort. It is a rational trade inside their system, because the system rewards coherence. They do not experience it as loss. They experience it as being true to themselves. The tragedy is that truth becomes a cage. Now watch how the loop becomes more sophisticated. It learns to protect itself. At first, the person declines a single opportunity. Then they develop habits that preempt opportunities. They avoid networks where money is discussed. They do not apply for grants or paid collaborations. They curate their feed away from successful people. The environment then supplies fewer opportunities. Scarcity becomes structural. The mind now says, see, the world is rigged. The social narrative flips from personal to systemic. It sounds like righteous analysis. It functions as defense. That defense has a secondary effect. It attracts a social identity. The person becomes known as a critic of the system. They collect followers who share the sentiment. Social reinforcement seals the loop. The person's identity is no longer only internal. It now lives in the eyes of others. That external validation makes change harder. To change would mean losing applause. The loop, by this stage, is not just mental. It is social and economic. I want to be precise about psychology here. The trigger is often envy. Envy gets dressed in morality and becomes persuasive. The brain is adept at moralizing envy because morality is respected socially. Saying, I hate that they exploited someone looks nobler than I want that. So envy learns to speak in moral terms. That language buys its safety. The person thinks they are righteous, but underneath is a simple ache that wants what someone else has. That ache drives attention toward rumors, scandals, and explanations that fit the narrative. The loop then uses those explanations as fuel. Let me show the reinforcement cycle in 4 short steps, because once you see its clarity, you cannot unknow it. Step 1. The moral identification, an internal mantra like money corrupts. Step 2. The behavioral reflex, avoiding a particular action. Step 3. The outcome, a small loss or maintain status quo. Step 4. Confirmation, interpret the outcome as proof. Those 4 steps repeat until they become automatic. The important hinge is step 2. The choice to act differently at that moment starts a different story. This loop also has stages. Early-stage loopers may simply miss opportunities. Mid-stage loopers will fracture relationships by interrogating friends' incomes. Late-stage loopers will build entire narratives of systemic guilt and expect nothing for themselves. The longer the loop runs, the more it metastasizes into identity. That is why this pattern feels moral and immovable. It is a reliable source of meaning. Changing it threatens existential furniture. Now, hearing all this, you might ask, can someone be in the loop and still be generous? Yes. Generosity does not prove absence of loop thinking. Sometimes generosity is the mask for scarcity-driven righteousness. A person can give time, volunteer, or donate small amounts while refusing to scale their capacity to give. Their generosity feels morally valuable. It is, but it is often capped by the same inner file that resists abundance. The paradox deepens. They want to help, but keep themselves thin, so help remains limited and moral. I want to give you a concrete sequence that breaks the loop at its most vulnerable point, the interpretation stage. This is a small, actionable exercise I have used with clients. When an opportunity arrives, do 3 things before you respond. First, separate facts from story. Write down the objective elements. No labels, no motives, just facts. Second, list at least 2 possible moral interpretations, one that supports your current belief and one that contradicts it. Third, pick an experimental choice that is neither an identity performance nor a safety retreat, a middle, pragmatic step. The experiment is not a commitment to a new identity. It is a test. Why does this work? Because the loop depends on quick moralizing. It thrives in rapid, unexamined narratives. Slow the mind down. Force curiosity. Curiosity interrupts the automatic confirmation engine. An experiment produces data that can contradict the old file. Too often people interpret outcomes through the old file and call that truth. Experiments create fresh truth. There is one more mechanism that strengthens the loop narrative economy. Humans prefer stories that are clean. They are corrupt is cleaner than maybe they were lucky, maybe they were talented, maybe they made mistakes and also did hard work. Clean stories reduce cognitive load. The brain will choose neatness over complexity. That is why the loop is energetically cheap to maintain. Changing it is an energy investment. You sign up to carry more complexity. At the end of the day, the sabotage loop is not a moral indictment. It is a mechanical account of how beliefs convert into reality. It explains why you can rant against wealth on Tuesday and still wake on Wednesday feeling like you deserve what you don't have. It explains why people can be eloquent about ethics and still quietly wish they had what others have. The loop rewards consistency. It punishes contradiction with outcomes that match the louder signal. If you recognize yourself here, the next question is urgent. How long will you keep running the loop before something has to change? You will either reach a breaking point or you will slowly trade more of your life for moral safety. The next part will examine that breaking point. There is always a moment where the system's costs become undeniable. Sometimes it is a financial crash. Sometimes it is a relational rupture. Sometimes it is the quiet collapse of possibility in midlife. The question I will ask next is simple and brutal. What happens when the loop's price becomes unbearable? And what choices open up at that rupture? We'll go there now. The crisis arrives with particular clarity. It has a feeling. It is a cold, honest exhaustion that no moral posture can warm. You notice it as a repeated pattern of losses, of doors closing for reasons that no longer sound noble. You begin to taste the cost of your identity. That taste is the breaking point. It forces a question: continue defending the posture or accept responsibility for the consequences? I have watched this moment enough times to recognize its anatomy. First comes the accumulation, little missed raises, partnerships that evaporated, a business that stays small while others scale. Then comes a sharply humiliating event, a savings account exhausted, a family member asking for help you cannot give, a bankruptcy notice, a divorce because you never had flexibility. That event is the signal the subconscious finally cannot sweeten into virtue talk. It hurts too much to keep lying to yourself. One man I worked with arrived in my office at 49 with a ledger open like a confession. He had spent 2 decades signaling moral purity about money. He lectured about integrity at the local co-op. He refused profitable contracts. It looks like fumbling, missteps, and embarrassment. The purist will have to market. The moralist will have to learn to charge. The conspirator will have to ask honest questions about competence and luck. They will make mistakes. They will feel shame. Shame is the sting you paid to keep your file. Now you must pay it again to change it. But this time the sting accompanies growth. I saw a woman in her early 40s reach that point. She had been a volunteer leader, preaching about sustainable values. She was asked to join a paid program that would train her to scale her work. Her first reflex was to refuse, then to rationalize. A mentor asked her one question: what will failing to accept this cost in 5 years? The question pressed. She accepted the fee, launched a pilot, charged a fair price, and hired someone. The outcomes were imperfect. She had to negotiate messy compromises. But the pilot allowed her work to grow. She told me months later, "I am still careful, but I'm less afraid of money." That phrase, "less afraid," is the hallmark of a new orientation. I need to name the psychological resistances at play in that moment. Pride is a big one. Pride about suffering is addictive. Victimhood is another. It is easier to tell a story of being wronged than to look at choices. Shame is powerful because it attaches identity to failure. The spiritual rhetoric around simplicity or anti-materialism often masks these resistances with high-sounding language. To break the loop, you must be willing to lose that applause. That is the cost of freedom. There is an institutional dimension too. Families, communities, faith traditions may echo the old file. They will congratulate you for being unbought. Leaving that identity can mean relational friction. You will get questions. You will get accusations of selling out. Prepare for that. The judgment you fear is often more imagined than real. Those who love you will adapt if they see your values remain intact. Those who don't may not have been helping you at scale anyway. At the breaking point, practical strategies matter. The first is tree-off. When scarcity becomes urgent, you must make decisions that prioritize stability over purity. That might mean taking a contract you earlier would have dismissed. It might mean charging a price that makes you uncomfortable. Those actions are not betrayals. They are instruments. Frame them as experiments, not identity conversions. Experiments carry less existential threat. Second, build an evidence list. As you try new actions, write down the concrete effects. Did charging more free you for creative work? Did forming a partnership increase impact? Did investing in marketing bring better clients? Small, repeated evidence is the cement of a new file. The brain will accept the new narrative when the data overwhelms the old story. Third, seek mentorship transparently. The person who has been stuck often mistrusts mentors because they are associated in their mind with exploitation. Choose mentors who can demonstrate integrity and who are willing to discuss ethics and business in the same conversation. Integrity without skill cannot scale. Skill without integrity can harm. You must learn to hold both questions simultaneously. Finally, practice rewriting language. Your inner monologue is a script that you repeat. Begin to say different sentences. Money amplifies who I am is one. I can do good at scale is another. They feel foreign at first. Say them anyway. Language precedes habit. The breaking point is also an ethical demand. It asks you to accept that refusing every temptation is not necessarily virtuous. It asks you to accept that stewardship requires means. If your stated goal is impact, the tools to expand impact often require money. That is not corruption. It is logistics. The sooner you treat resources as instruments rather than moral tests, the sooner you can build capacity. I've said that a new file must be reinforced. At the breaking point, you have a window of openness. Use it. Install rituals that build new signals, price experiments, honest admiration lists, mentorship time, and financial planning sessions. Rituals convert intention into habit. Habits change the signal the universe reads. I will give you one concrete practice for this phase. Call it the integrity audit. Once a week, Take an hour and list every decision you made about money. For each decision, answer 3 questions. What was the factual outcome? What story did I tell myself about the choice? Did the story serve my goals or protect my identity? Then pick one small corrective action for the next week. Do it. Record the result. Small corrections compound faster than grand vows. People who make it through this juncture rarely become unanchored optimists. They become careful, often skeptical, but also materially empowered. They maintain their ethical sensibility while learning the skills of stewardship. They gain a new posture. They hold their values and their assets simultaneously. If you are listening and your body tightens at this description, know 2 things. First, that tension is a signal of buried cost. Second, you do not have to admit it to anyone but yourself. Begin with an experiment. The next part will show how to start that experiment concretely. It will introduce a new pattern, a compact ritual, and a mindset shift that begins to rewire your inner file. If you are at the brink, this is where you step. If you are not, pay attention anyway. The next piece is where the work becomes practical and where the first real evidence starts to appear. I call the new pattern a stewardship posture. It sounds dull. It is not. It is a rewiring of how you interpret means, choices, and identity. Instead of money being a moral test, it becomes a neutral instrument. Instead of scarcity confirming virtue, resources become the feedback you use to expand care. This change is small in language and enormous in consequence. When I say stewardship posture, I mean 3 things at once. First, you stop equating possession with corruption. Second, you accept that responsibility requires resources. Third, you practice curiosity about how value is created. Those 3 moves dismantle the moral alarm that used to trigger the sabotage loop. They change the question from, can I keep my soul, to how can I do more with what I have? Naming a pattern matters. When people are stuck, they describe themselves in morals. I don't want to be one of those people. That sentence keeps them frozen. Naming a posture, stewardship, gives a practical axis to act on. It is not a slogan. It is an operating system. It changes what counts as evidence. Let me be concrete. Under stewardship, you treat money like oxygen. Oxygen itself is neither good nor bad. It allows building, healing, living. You can use oxygen to blow a candle or to start a fire. The moral value attaches to the use, not to the element. When I started saying this to clients, they bristled. They had decades of spiritual language that made scarcity a badge. They tied identity to sacrifice. I did not ask them to abandon those values. I asked them to hold them with a tool in hand. Holding values and holding tools at once is the difficult posture. It means being moral and effective. It means negotiating prices without collapsing into guilt. It means hiring staff while still caring about mission. It means cultivating admiration for competence without confusing it with greed. None of those things are easy, but they are learnable. And that is the point. A posture can be trained. This is the mini ritual I ask people to use as an entry point. I call it the integrity audit. It is short, concrete, repeatable, and it interrupts the automatic moralization stage of the sabotage loop. The ritual has 5 steps and a timing rule. 5 steps sound like work. They are small work. Repeating them produces evidence. Evidence beats story. Step 1. When an opportunity arrives, a contract, a price conversation, a collaboration invite, stop. Breathe. Give yourself 3 minutes. The ritual starts with a pause because the mind moves fast and moralizes faster. Pause buys you curiosity. Step 2. Write down only facts for 2 minutes. Facts are not interpretations. Facts are observable. Client asked for more deliverables is a fact. They are trying to exploit me is not. This forces the brain out of narrative mode and into data mode. Step 3. List 2 plausible motivations for the other party, 1 generous and 1 ambiguous. For example, they need help to scale impact and they want cheaper labor. Both can be true. Giving the generous explanation equal weight loosens the moral reflex. It also trains you to look for competence, not just corruption. Step 4. Choose one experimental action. The experiment must be small and reversible. Do not rename it a value shift. Call it a test. I will give you 2 examples from my practice to make the mechanics visible. One client was a community organizer who refused to charge for workshops. He believed charging would make his movement transactional. He taught for free for years and accumulated a reputation as principled and overworked. He was exhausted. We did an integrity audit when a local foundation offered a paid series. He paused. He wrote facts. He listed motives. The foundation would increase access. The foundation wanted credibility. He chose an experiment, a paid pilot with a sliding scale. He set measurable outcomes, number of attendees, feedback scores, a minimum pay threshold. The pilot brought money and doubled attendance. It also allowed him to hire an assistant. He kept his values. He also built capacity. He reported back, "I am still careful, but charging did not feel like selling my soul. It felt like buying my time." A different client resisted mentoring because they believed mentors were exploitative. A mentor offered a paid 6-month program that included direct feedback and client introductions. The client feared being co-opted. We ran the audit. The facts: mentor offered structure, introductions, and a clear curriculum. Motives: mentor could be generous. Mentor could be seeking talent to farm. Experiment: accept 1 month and set a cancellation check at month end. Outcome: the month produced 2 paying clients and an honest critique that improved their product. The client left the program conscious that skill, not exploitation, moved their work forward. He said, "I bought a way to do my work better." That is not corruption. That is training. Both examples show the same logic. An experiment converts moral panic into information. Information reduces the power of an old file. Repetition rewires the file. There are resistances you must expect. Pride resists paying for what you feel you should already earn. Shame resists charging more because it feels like claiming status. Identity friction arises when friends or community accuse you of selling out. All of those are real. The ritual does not eliminate pain. It distributes it differently. You still feel shame sometimes. The difference is you have data to answer shame with. I charged X and bought Y. The outcome was Z. Facts blunt accusations. You will also face social friction. Your circle may have celebrated your moral posture. When you change the behavior, applause can disappear. People will test you. Expect questions. Prepare a language script. You will need short sentences to defend your experiments. "I'm testing a model to scale impact" is enough. Do not defend philosophy in every conversation. Practice a few neutral answers and repeat them. A second practice complements the integrity audit. I call it honest admiration. It is a 5-minute daily ritual. Each morning identify one person whose results you resent. Write 1 sentence about what they did well. Example: she built reliable systems. End with a sentence: I can learn that skill. The practice trains your attention toward competence. Competence is teachable. Resentment is not. This is not flattery. It is retraining attention. You should do both practices together. The audit interrupts your habits in the moment. Admiration rewires your trajectory over time. Together, they change the stories your nervous system prefers. Next, practical scaffolding. When you begin experiments, create a small evidence folder. For every experiment, log the outcome in 2 sentences. Date it. After 4 experiments, you will have enough material to rewrite an inner file. The brain accepts patterns. Data becomes pattern. Patterns become identity. Mentorship is another lever I cannot skip. Find one mentor who models both ethics and craft. Not a sermonizer. Not a cold operator. Look for someone who can say, plainly, "Here is how I did this and why it was worth it." Mentors shorten the path. They translate competence. They also normalize the awkward feelings you will have. A good mentor helps you manage shame by reframing it as price of growth. Do not expect perfection. Expect models you can copy and adapt. There are financial instruments and structures to support this shift. Pricing structure experiments, revenue sharing models, pilot offers, and contingency contracts are practical ways to honor ethics and capture value. Negotiation becomes a craft, not a moral hazard. You learn to phrase proposals so they are fair and clear. The more you externalize fairness contracts, scopes, outcomes, the less your mind needs moral scripts to decide. Language matters. I teach clients a few sentences to practice. Say them aloud until they stop feeling like lies. Money amplifies who I am. I can do good at scale. My work deserves compensation. They are short. Say them in the mirror. Say them in the car. Language precedes habit. As your mouth repeats new claims, the brain rehearses a different future. Expect setbacks. An experiment might fail. A client might react badly. A partnership might dissolve. Those are expected. They are not proof of moral failure. They are proof of being in the arena. Track them. Learn. Adjust. Repeat. Finally, a governance practice. Stewardship demands accountability. Create a quarterly integrity ledger. Once every 3 months, write down decisions you made about money with motive, action, and impact. Ask 3 questions. Did I protect my values? Did I expand impact? Did I grow capacity? Be brutal. This ledger makes patterns visible. It also reduces the chance you'll slip back into the old loop because slipping becomes visible. The new pattern is not a promise of comfort. It is an admission of responsibility. You will lose some applause. You will gain competence. That is the trade. If you can hold both your ethics and your ambition, the universe will stop giving you evidence that you cannot have both. That is how congruence works. If you are still listening, a small test. For the next opportunity that scares you, do only the first 2 steps of the audit. Pause. Write facts. Come back and tell yourself an honest, generous motive for the other party. If your mind resists that generous motive, you have found the file that needs rewiring. Keep a note. That note will be your next experiment. This work sounds administrative. It is. Identity rewiring is clerical at first. You fix the record. You update the files. Then life starts to change. The next part will show those changes in practice. It will give a picture of how micro-experiments become a different life. Keep that in mind. The next chapter is where the theory becomes visible in ordinary days, and where the first real rewards of stewardship appear. If you are ready to imagine a different life, turn the page. When the new pattern settles, change is often subtle at first. It begins in small acts. You notice fewer moral reactions. You notice a different curiosity. You start asking how value is made instead of asking who sold out. Those tiny shifts compound. I want to show you scenes. I will not give you abstract promises. I will give you small, believable sequences. They are not fairy tales. They are practical and messy. They are the kind of changes that make life steadier. Morning scene 1. You are offered a freelance engagement that pays twice your usual rate. Previously, your mind would reach for a moral explanation. They must be desperate, or they are trying to buy loyalty. Now you pause. You run the integrity audit in 3 minutes. You write facts. The scope is clear. The client has a track record. You choose an experiment. Take the job with a clear refund clause and a defined delivery schedule. The work is done. Income arrives. You hire a virtual assistant to offload repetitive tasks. You write one more deliverable in the evening that expands the project's impact. You are tired but not depleted. You recognize that charging well bought you time. The moral alarm is quiet. That small practical win moves 100 neurons. Scene 2. You run a community program. For years you refused paid tiers. You feared exclusion. You feared corrupting your mission. After practicing honest admiration, you begin to study how larger programs scale ethically. You pilot a tiered model that subsidizes access with scholarship seats. The pilot sells out. You hire a part-time coordinator. The program grows. More people access it. You still hold your values. You also have staff who ensure quality. The everyday pressure eases. Capacity is not glamorous. It is governance. but it means your impact is not limited by your physical hours. Scene 3. A friend succeeds publicly. Old you would whisper accusations into the margin. New you asks a different question. What systems did they build? You interview. Those sentences can coexist. Holding them at once is the competency you develop. It is not spiritual hypocrisy. It is integrated stewardship. There will be moments of embarrassment. You will misprice something. You will take a contract and realize the scope was bigger. You will deliver and feel exposed. Those moments are not regression. They are the cost of practice. Pay the cost and learn. Doing so slowly erodes the habit of moralizing. The brain prefers repeated micro-wins to moral vows. I want to map 3 types of visible changes you will see after 6 months if you practice consistently. First, resource elasticity. Not everyone becomes wealthy immediately, but many find a small cushion where none existed before. They have money to replace a broken laptop. They can pay an unexpected bill without shame. This is not ostentation. It is stability. Stability reduces moral drama. It lets you show up with better choices. Second, relational recomposition. People who were your loudest applauders for your moral purity may become critics. That is expected. Some relationships will fray, but new connections will appear. These will be people who respect both your values and your craft. They might be collaborators or paid supporters. These relationships are less performative and more functional. Third, creative multiplication. Once you stop squeezing yourself as the only resource, you can fund others. You can hire someone to run a project you believed only you could do. You can replicate your work in multiple places. Impact becomes scalable. And yes, scaling brings its own ethical dilemmas. That is part of the work. You will have to create governance. You will create guardrails. That is growth. I want to give you a fuller example, a story that stretches over time. A woman I know, Mari, spent years volunteering as a community health advocate. She refused payment because she felt paid work would corrupt her motives. She was exhausted and lived month to month. After a crisis of burnout, she accepted a paid pilot from a health fund with strict outcome measures. She used the integrity audit to structure the pilot with clear deliverables and a graduation clause. The pilot paid modestly. Mari hired a coordinator and bought simple software. She also agreed to teach the coordinator the values that mattered. The pilot succeeded. The fund extended the contract. In 3 years, Mari built a small organization with 5 staff. She told me, "I am still the person I was. I am less tired. I can serve more people." She did not become a different person morally. She simply had more capacity to live her values. That is the crucial point. You do not change your core values. You change the channel through which they reach the world. The moral posture remains. The operational capacity improves. There is another subtle change that matters. Admiration becomes a learning channel, not a corrosive feeling. When you see another's success, you can parse it into replicable elements. Did they invest in marketing? Did they systematize delivery? Did they make one brave hire? Breaking success down into mechanics removes the moral fog. You transform envy into a practical syllabus. Now a warning. This pattern is fragile. It can be collapsed by 2 forces. One is perfectionism. If you demand that every experiment be tidy, you will hesitate and not act. The other is guilt weaponized by your circle. Expect questions like, "Are you selling out?" Prepare simple answers. You do not need to justify the entire arc of your life in a single conversation. Another risk, you may pivot too quickly. Not every experiment requires scale. Sometimes a small, local model is ethically preferable. Stewardship is not a treadmill to accumulate wealth. It is a posture to expand capacity for care. Keep your intention clear. Ask, does this enable more care? If yes, test. If the answer is no, rethink. Let me give you 5 markers that your posture is changing. They are practical and easy to test. 1. You can accept money without a long justifying monologue. You can say, simply, "This work requires funding." 2. You can ask for help and accept it. 3. You keep your standards public and measurable. 4. You are willing to delegate tasks that drain you. 5. You can celebrate another person's success without feeling smaller. If you can claim a majority of those markers after 6 months, the pattern is forming. If not, you are still practicing. This is not binary. It is iterative. Finally, think of the future as containing both risks and possibilities. The new posture does not remove the world's unfairness. It equips you to respond to it more effectively. You will still encounter exploitation. You will still meet people whose intentions are weak. But you will be able to design responses that protect your integrity while preserving your ability to act. Imagine, for a moment, 10 years from now, you have built modest reserves. You have trained 2 people to do what you did. Your work reaches 3 times as many people. You still speak the same language of values. You are not unrecognizable. You are recognizable and more effective. That is the future I am asking you to test. If you are skeptical, test only one small move. Pick one recurring activity you do for free and charge a modest fee once this month. Offer a sliding scale. Track the result. It is not a value betrayal. It is an experiment that will teach you whether your moral file or your operational habits are driving your life. Most people are surprised by the result. The next part will close this diagnosis. I will ask you hard questions. You will be invited to decide where you stand. I will give you a tiny, actionable step you can take today. The choice after that step is yours. But first, reflect on these scenes. See which one looks like tomorrow for you. If you feel a flicker of possibility, keep reading. We began with a harsh mirror. Now I close with a compact map. The pattern we have traced is simple and precise. You believe money is corrupting. You desire more of it. Your mind resolves that contradiction by moralizing others and by withholding from yourself. That resolves identity at the expense of capacity. The universe, or the social reality you inhabit, simply mirrors back the stronger signal. Your nervous system believes you deserve scarcity. So scarcity arrives. That is the engine. You can keep that engine running. Many people do. It will deliver a life consistent with their signal, righteous limitation. Or you can alter the signal. That is the offer I want to leave you with. It is not a promise of quick riches. It is an invitation to responsibility. Take a moment and answer honestly. Where are you in this story? Are you still performing moral purity to avoid risk? Are you stuck rationalizing missed opportunities? Or are you at the breaking point, exhausted by the costs of your posture and ready to test something different? If you are unsure, try a simple reflection exercise now. Think of one success you envied in the last 6 months. Instead of listening for the moral disqualifier, ask, what did they do tactically? Name 2 specific actions they took. This is a tiny curiosity experiment. It will show whether your default response is judgment or investigation. I want to offer you a micro step you can do today. It costs nothing but attention. It is also a promise to yourself. Write this sentence in a notebook and say it aloud. I will test one experiment that prioritizes impact over image. Keep it in pen. Now choose a concrete experiment. Charge more for one service. Accept one paid collaboration. Hire a part-time person for 5 hours. Whatever feels like a modest stretch. The key is designation. Call it an experiment, not a conversion. This reduces identity threat and increases curiosity. Now a small framework to guide the experiment for 7 days. Note the facts of the offer. Name one generous motive for the other party. Choose one reversible action. Set a simple metric, revenue, time saved, client satisfaction. Check in at day 7 and write 2 sentences about the outcome. That is all. The discipline is low. The yield is high because you are collecting reality, not rehearsing fear. I will give you 2 sentences to repeat on the way out. Say them until they stop sounding foreign. Money amplifies who I am. My integrity is not measured by how little I earn. They are modest claims. They are not self-congratulation. They are truth calibrations for a nervous system. You will resist these steps for reasons that are both public and private. Publicly, people will ask if you are changing. Privately, you will fear losing identity. Prepare a short script. I'm experimenting with ways to scale impact, is enough. Do not write a manifesto in response to every critic. Keep it small. I should be blunt about the moral cost if nothing changes. The longer you hold the old posture, the more it calcifies. Another common worry. If I change, I will lose community. Yes, some people will distance themselves. But community is not only applause. True community adapts. If your closest relationships are tied only to your suffering as a status, they may not be sustaining. That is painful to admit, but it is often liberating. Real friends will show up. Real collaborators will help you be better. You will gain new mirrors. At this point, you may ask, what if I try and it fails? Then you will have data. Failure is part of apprenticeship. The alternative, never testing, keeps you in a static theology of virtue. No one wants you to risk everything. I ask only for small, reversible tests. They will produce information. Information reprograms belief. Let me give one final example, because stories stick. A man I worked with, Daniel, ran workshops on ethical business. He refused to commercialize his content. He survived on intermittent grants. At 42, he faced insolvency twice. He loved his work, but was depleted. After a breakdown, he agreed to design a paid online version with a sliding scale and a scholarship fund. He insisted the scholarship fund remain publicly audited. He priced realistically. The program reached 10 times the number of people he used to see locally. He hired 2 people from his community and created a modest surplus for grants. The moral of his story is not that money saved him. The moral is that accepting money built systems that allowed his values to reach more people. He felt the same at heart. He had more reach. If you recognize yourself in these examples, you have 2 choices: continue on the existing trajectory or begin tests. Both are moral choices. Both have consequences. Choose deliberately. Now the small administrative thing. If you decide to act, track results. Build a simple folder labeled experiments. Record date, action, outcome. Do 4 experiments in 12 weeks. If 3 produce learning that nudges you forward, you are on a new path. If not, you have honest data to reassess. That is how change becomes real, slow, disciplined, and visible. Before I close, 2 candid challenges. First, be prepared to manage shame. Shame will return like an old song. It will whisper that you betrayed an ideal. Answer shame with facts. Point to the ledger. Show the outcomes. Second, expect moments of isolation. Some allies will not follow. That is normal. Build a new circle that holds both values and craft. One final invitation. If you stayed with me this long, it means this subject touches you. Comment below with one small experiment you will run this month. Tell me only the city and the experiment. I read these notes. They help others see what real attempts look like. If you want a single short sentence to carry into your day, here it is. I will test one small action today that expands capacity and keeps my values. Say it now. Thank you for listening. If you found this useful, share it with someone who will do the work, not just admire the idea. If you are on social, drop the city and the tiny experiment. Let's turn private virtue into public practice.